Good day, Ad Copy class members. Today we're going to talk about research. What you do before you start creating. Because you best not start typing immediately. You need to do some research, get your data, review that data, and then create a strategy or a plan for what you're actually going to write and you or someone else is going to design, put together to create an advertisement or a marketing piece of one kind or another. The very first thing you need to do is do some research. Now, there's all kinds of differing research venues and sort of organizational plans, and those start on page 42 in your textbook, and there's a lot of really good information in your textbook about that. But I wanted to read to you from a book called Cutting Edge Advertising by Jim Etchison. Just a little hint about how important the research and strategy part is of what we do in advertising. He says, strategic thinking must become the subtext to your creative thinking. Strategic thinking must become the subtext to your creative thinking. It must become instinctive. It helps to be what Lionel Hunt calls a student of human nature. The best creatives have this quality, as you are about to see. Their work is unconventional, so is their thinking. Yet, in the final analysis, their creative processes are disciplined. So, this is a discipline. Research is a discipline of people who are going to think creatively, and it's a very wise discipline. So, different ways to research. Well, the first thing is, or the first possible way that you could do some research on your client or a product or on an organization, whoever it is that you are representing or creating advertising for, is to experience it firsthand. And that's probably the cheapest way to do it too, although sometimes it takes travel depending on where your client or the product or the organization is. But get that product and feel it, smell it, look at it, observe it, watch it. If it's a series of events, go watch some of those events. Experience it firsthand and then observe while you're there. And that is probably perhaps the easiest and one of the best ways of researching a product or a client. But if you can't do that, you have some other options. Maybe someone can go do that for you. If not, you can gather information and materials from your client yourself or about the product by going to the right venues, such as product samples, samples of whatever that is that you're going to be producing an ad about, or samples of some of their materials, because almost everyone is going to already have marketing materials that they've used in the past. So do some research and find previous ads or previous marketing pieces or clips that have been in newspapers or articles that have already been written about the product or about your client or about this building that you're promoting, whatever it is. Look at what the competition has done in their advertising and in their other kinds of marketing in other venues. Pick up those catalogs and brochures Check speeches and seminars that some of your clients have held and read and listen to those if you possibly can. Watch videos. Maybe there are some TEDx talks by your clients about their products or about themselves or their organization. Obviously, website is probably going to be the first place that you would go to, and many of us would do that nowadays. Check out their website, check out their social media, obviously. If you were talking about Mary B. Martin School of the Arts, you'd want to grab one of our brochures and our rack card, and definitely go to our website. You'd have plenty of advertising to look at, or some of our flyers that we've done in the past. So maybe they've got posters and flyers, other printed materials that you can check out to learn about them. You're gathering information. You're building an arsenal of knowledge about your client. Package labels, manuals, general business plans maybe that they've had in the past or in the recent past, direct mail pieces. Do they have information from focus groups that they have already set up and they have data from those, or you can watch the video from the focus groups or read the transcripts. Do they have newsletters, annual reports, existing sales figures? I mean, they have to have sales figures, quarterly sales figures at the very least, that in their reports. All of this gives you information about your client and about what they've done in the past, and you can then talk with them about what has been successful, what kind of results have they gotten, and what has not been successful. Then you can do some additional research, perhaps, depending on your budgets. You can do surveys, which are not terribly expensive, especially if they are online surveys or email surveys. Phone surveys are more expensive because you have to pay telemarketing organizations to do the surveys for you. Set up a focus group, although that is very time intensive, and that is usually monetarily intensive as well, because you typically pay people to participate in a focus group, and you typically feed them while they're there. And then just the whole setup and renting a place to perhaps have the focus group. Then you have to have monitors, people who are there to actually take notes or to do videotaping. So focus groups are pretty expensive. You can do interviews, ethnography, experiments if you're really going to go in depth into research. If you have your own laboratories, that obviously would be something that you would do. Or if you have the money, or your client has the money, you might get official research data from syndicated marketing data from differing syndicated marketing companies who are quite expensive, such as Nielsen. We've all heard of Nielsen, MediaMark, Prism, Scarborough. There are all kinds of companies that do research. But then you have to know what you're going to ask. You have to think about what kinds of questions you need to find out. What is the information that you are seeking to be able to build this campaign or this advertising package that you're working on? Your book has all of this in a lot of detail, and I've culled things from other texts as well as from experience. But some of the questions that you're going to want to ask, and I'll put these notes on D2L for you so that you don't have to write all this down furiously. But you want to ask, what are the features of this product or of this organization or of this company? What are the benefits of it? What makes it special and differentiates it from the competition or from other products that are similar to it? If it's not different, what are you all stressing that maybe the competing products are not stressing or emphasizing in advertising, or what maybe should you be stressing or they be stressing in the advertising. What technologies are used to create this product? People are very interested in the technology that produces materials nowadays. And what technologies are in the world that affect this product, perhaps. How is this product used? What are its actual functions? What is this company's list of services? You want to ask those questions. Who uses it then? What's its main target audience? Is it consumers? Is it industries? Is it persons with disabilities? Who actually uses this product right now? And then you can start thinking about with your clients other target audiences that you could be reaching out to and maybe expanding those audiences. What problem does the product or the program or these services, what problem do they solve in the marketplace? How are they helping people? Viewer benefit, customer or consumer benefit is a huge issue and it's very important when you're trying to market or persuade people to be interested in a product. How does the product work? I mean, how does it function literally? Do you have to push a button? Is it complicated? Is it simple? Does it simplify life? How reliable is it? How efficient is it? People care about that because time is short. Who's bought the product in the past? What materials and sizes does the product come in? There's so many questions. And certainly an important question is that product guaranteed? Because people care about guarantees. They want a guarantee. What might the potential buyer ask? When you are doing research, you need to ask this question also. Who will buy the product? What market is it sold to? What is the customer's main concern in this particular target audience? Is this kind of audience most interested in quality? Are they most interested in price? Are they most interested in size, reliability, efficiency, delivery? How am I going to get it? Are they concerned about how it will get to their house? Are they concerned about how will they maintain it after they have it? So you have to ask yourself, what does the buyer or potential buyer want to know? What are they most concerned about? What's the character of the typical buyer? What are they like? What motivates that buyer? And you want to understand your potential customer as well as possible. And we've all heard about demographics and how important demographics are in marketing. Well, they really are. We use that kind of demographic data constantly in this research process and strategizing process or strategic process of determining what our plan is, so that we are informed about our audience as well as about the product that we're going to be pitching or selling or persuading people to engage in or purchase. So, demographic data, and you probably know what it is because it's a pretty common term nowadays, is it refers to the selected population and the characteristics of that selected population, whether this information, demographic information, is typically used by the government, is typically used in marketing, as we're going to be talking about, and it's often used in opinion research. And really, almost every company even smaller local businesses can well use demographic information about their target audience and about audiences that they would like to target. And demographics generally fall into the areas of race, age, income, certainly, disabilities, mobility. You know, are they able to drive cars? Do they ride public transportation? Do they use airplanes, trains? Educational level or attainment. These are all demographics that I'm sure you get asked when you fill out forms, go to doctors. Do they own the home? That's demographic information, or a home, or are they in an apartment, or are they in public housing? What's their employment status? Are they employed, unemployed, on disability? Location. Where are they located in the country, in the state, rural or urban? And do they have children? Do they have grandchildren? Those are all demographic elements that we will definitely be taking into consideration as we do our research this semester and hopefully going forward. One of the most common demographic areas, and one that we will talk about quite a lot, and I will give you assignments for differing age groups. Excuse me, because they are different. Now, you can't say that everyone within a demographic age group is exactly alike, and we know that that's not true. But there are trends, and one of the wonderful things about the internet that didn't exist when I was your age is that we can look up this kind of information on the internet. It didn't exist when I was your age at all, and for a time, even once the internet was available, a lot of the information was not as accurate or not as available as it is now, because that was a process for things being loaded onto the internet and posted onto the internet. So we can find so much of this information just by what we call Googling, or going to a search engine and just typing in some basic words, keywords, like for age groups, we would type in millennials, baby boomers, Gen Xers. Those are probably the three big age group demographics that we deal with most right now. And then, of course, the younger generation. We haven't really given a name to that, although some people call them Y, Generation Y. Millennials are probably the closest, I guess, to my age. I'm a little bit older than that, but millennials were born in the 1980s to the year 2000. Baby boomers are the folks before my actual demographic group, and those were the immediately post-World War II generation, the baby boom, when everybody came back from the war and husbands and wives were reunited. Or women and men were reunited. There was a big baby boom. And those were the folks born in the mid-1940s, 1946, to the early 1960s. That's baby boomers. Then I'm actually a Gen Xer, and that's after the post-war baby boom, folks who were born in the early 60s to the 80s. So they can be, you can just Google millennials and food, or Gen Xers and food, or Gen Xers and automobiles, Gen Xers and housing or homes, and you can get a good idea from the several top and sometimes digging a little bit deeper into the responses that come up, some good data on what those differing age groups are looking for, what they appreciate. Are they looking for a good deal monetarily, or are they looking for actually high quality and not as concerned about cost? Amazing. And I'll be asking you all to be doing some of that research very, very soon. Some of that you will do in teams, and some of that you will do on your own. And it's a much easier process than it was many moons ago before we could use the internet. It might have taken many hours in the library or contacting researchers or research companies to get the information, but there's some decent information that we can access on the internet and still feel like we're landing pretty accurately without going through a lot of these other elements that we've talked about. But some of these things I will be expecting you to do when you actually work on your final project for this class, because you'll have a real client for that, and you'll want to do some of this firsthand experience and gathering materials from the client. Then once you have all this data, it doesn't magically align itself and have little lights that flash for the information that's most important that you need to use and integrate into your campaign. But you will have to do some interpretation, thinking about it, sorting through some data that you probably won't need or use. And there are some reminders at the very end of the chapter in your text that refer to the most common mistakes in doing research. And I think that they're pretty good. A couple of them are particularly good to think about. One of them is beware of asking the wrong questions when you're doing your research. And that can be pretty troublesome, and it can be costly. That happened to Coca-Cola back in, I guess it was in the mid-1980s. They did some research and found out that people liked new sodas, new soft drinks. Well, so they went ahead and created a new soft drink, a new Coke. It was a terrible failure. It was, the hue and cry regarding that was gigantic, ginormous. And it turned out that they didn't ask people. They did ask them if they liked new sodas, but they didn't ask them their affinity or their connection with the standard classic Coke. So they ended up going back to the classic Coke, and the new Coke has never been heard of again. And that was just the result of not asking the right questions in the research. So that should not be a haphazard or terribly off-the-cuff process. Also, something that's really crucial in using the internet especially is beware of believing everything that you read or everything that you see. It can't all be believed, and it is not all credible. So you want to be sure that you ask yourself, or you look at the sources that you're using for your information and your data. That's really important. Obviously, we're not going to use Wikipedia as a source, but as Heather Lorendo and I were talking about the other day, well, it's not a bad starting place sometimes to give you sort of the general landscape, but you want to be careful that your sources for your research are credible. Beware of not testing to see that your data is relevant to your client's actual issue, or what we call the problem. Jell-O, your book gives the example of Jell-O doing some testing, but not enough to get quite the right answers. Once again, they felt like people wanted something light and less heavy and less caloric. And maybe that was true. But once they started doing advertising for the light version of Jell-O, they found that people just really liked Jell-O because it was fun. It wiggled, it jiggled, kind of like I do when I walk. And so after some not so successful advertising, they found out that people were just looking for Jell-O for fun and went back to that. And that's where they have found and kept their success. And one of the last suggestions for warnings when you're doing research is to make sure that you're studying audience members that are actually typical of your audience. People who really, especially if you're doing focus groups and surveys, you want to be sure that the people that you are involving in that you are asking questions of, are actually typical of the audience that you're going to be trying to reach. You want to check all these factors because research is not cheap for the most part. The kind that we'll do for this class won't be very expensive. But for a client or a company, research is time intensive. It takes staff. It takes time, and it often takes monetary resources and the ability to travel sometimes to do some of that research. And so you don't want to be wasteful with that. So that's kind of an overview of research. Again, I'll put some notes on D2L for you. But because this is sort of list heavy, but your textbook has a lot of these lists that we've talked about, things to look for, things to ask about, questions to ask. And then we'll be following this up with a section on situation analysis. And so I'll have another video on that. In the meantime, do your research.